Would you like to introduce yourself, talk a bit about yourself, and then talk about impossible things? I'm going to leave that to you to explain what that is.
Sure. So my name is Hannah Jane Walker, and I am a writer that works across lots of different art forms. Sometimes I work in theatre, sometimes I work in radio, sometimes it's non-fiction books, and most recently I'm writing a fiction book. Usually collaborating with somebody from a different art form in some way. And the other strand of my work that I do is kind of creative education, facilitation and producing projects, thinking about how to include groups of people meaningfully in a process. So Impossible Things is about things that seem too impossible to sit with, or to look in the face of and to stay with the trouble of. We all became really interested in the relationship between how that plays out with climate and climate disaster and people's avoidance in relation to that, and fear or sense of urgency and shouting, and then people rejecting that and retreating from that. And also we all had conversations about how that mapped back to sort of personal situations in our own families and lives, and from quite young ages needing to sort of stay with that phrase of staying with the trouble. And we had this big conversation about, what does that mean? Like, how do humans use that ability to stay with something that feels too hard to face?
And for me, the connective thread in that is connectivity and community. If we think about any huge things in history or whatever, the coming together of people. I mean, if you think even about the pandemic, and the concept of community. And I say concept because I know a lot of people don't maybe buy into it anymore. And I understand why. I feel like more and more the world has become, we're really made to, we're really kind of like operate in an individualistic way, because it's hard, because it is tiring, it is exhausting. And it's like, I just got to get through the day.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's an individualistic approach. But then there's these moments like in the pandemic where people were coming together. Like where I was living in Coventry, and on our particular road there was quite a lot of like elderly people, and so we were like supporting them by getting their shopping, and you'd stand outside just by your gate just like talking to someone across the road, or we'd clap for the NHS and the nurses and doctors, whatever, and then that disappeared.
I know. And that's interesting, and you can feel those things when they happen, those moments of connection between communities whose views you may not share. Like, they
Yeah,
may not be people
yeah,
who you're like, I don't necessarily politically agree with them
yeah,
on that, but we're still people. We're still like
yeah.
people living in proximity to each other, and there's those moments of connection. When
Mm,
you feel those things, you can feel it in your body, can't you? You're like, that
absolutely.
is a real thing. And what I'm really interested in with theatre is it's one of the last spaces where you have that liveness,
Mm,
a group of people, and you can feel it in
yeah.
the room. And I don't quite know what the language is that it is for that,
Mm.
but I think that's, for me, that's what theatre is anyway. When I go to see it, I'm like, I can feel it. I can't necessarily articulate it, but here we all are outside of our houses,
Yeah. All coming
together.
together to experience this thing that's been created.
Yeah,
Um, I want to just go back to the impossible things, and so we often hear that audiences aren't scared enough about climate change, or people aren't scared enough. But what
yeah.
if fear isn't the problem, and it's that people don't know how to live with fear without shutting down? And what's the difference between fear that motivates and fear that paralyzes?
Mm.
And I just think, because like what we were saying, that when we think about climate justice, because there's so many things going on in the world, climate justice is another thing that is so big, and I don't believe people don't know about it. I don't believe people aren't, it's not even that they're not interested. I just think it's so big,
Yeah, yeah.
and then therefore it's like, as I said, I got to get through the day. That's over their problem, or that's something, kind of thing. And I don't necessarily, because a lot of people think, oh, people don't just understand. I think we do.
Yeah.
I think we do. I don't think that's what the issue is.
No, I agree. And I think that I was thinking about that, and I think that human beings are really motivated by story.
I absolutely, I agree.
Really, like when you think about things that create movements, there's always like, it can be, you never know what that story is going to be as well. You
Yeah,
never know what that story is going to be that changes the arc of the way something goes, but
yeah,
it does come from story. Whereas abstract systems are just terrifying.
Mm.
And so each time I watch, I found it really interesting over the last 15 years. I'm sure you have too. Like each time we're presented with like an update about the clock is ticking, we've got another year till no point of return, or climate scientists have discovered this part of the coral reef is now dead, or 1,000 protesters told to not do something they probably legally shouldn't be doing, and people are fighting for that. I think it's really interesting that that's talked about in a language of fear,
Yeah.
and rather than a language of story. And I don't mean story by like once upon a time
No,
everything
I
was
know what
fine.
you mean.
It's the science of it. It doesn't stir us to emotion.
But
And
don't forget, the systems that we live in, capitalism, for instance, capitalism tells us to live in a deficit,
yeah,
scarcity, right? And what is really hard, and what I've definitely been trying to actively do, is live in abundance.
yeah,
The opposite of scarcity, right? Because capitalism does tell us about fear, so we get more of, so we can buy those useless things to fill us up for that one moment, right? But abundance tells us to lean in. Abundance tells us to think collectively and build community. But
yeah,
scarcity doesn't. And scarcity brings about fear, And I think a lot of these big things, including climate justice and climate action, climate change, is all about the scarcity.
yes,
The icebergs are melting, like those are harsh statistics. More and more children are having asthma and eczema because of the environment that they live in. It's all scared. And the thing is, yeah, obviously it can coexist, but lean into the abundance more then. And I
yeah,
think we can do that through art and through storytelling a lot
yeah,
more, because through storytelling we're actually given the fuller picture. Science gives us some, stats and data, but we need the stories. We need that
yeah,
storytelling to give a full narrative.
yeah. And actually, funnily enough, I was having this conversation with another artist this morning, for an artist who commissioned for a project in Cambridge, and we were talking about connectedness, and they were talking about Cambridge in particular as a place of lack of connectedness, abundance in assets, but lack of connectedness. And we were saying, what's the role of artists who are mainly, in the main, brilliant at connection? Like
Mm.
that is like bread and butter. It's like, how do
Yeah.
you get people to lean in? Like, how do you get people to be attentive? Like, how do you get people to feel tender? How do
Yeah.
you get people to stay present? All of which are about abundance, aren't they?
Yeah,
About like,
absolutely.
because, it's those interpersonal qualities. So I think where the angle I'm coming at this from, and certainly Chris and I, the work that we've always made together is like, what is in us? Like, what is in us as people? Like, what are we made of? Like, what capacities do we have that is kind of easy to take for granted or really easy to forget that we have, but are actually like these extraordinary resources, which maybe just get sidelined for a bit or are not considered as valuable to the capitalist system, but actually are like extraordinary resiliences that we have, and like
Yeah,
these extra energies that we have, where you're like, well, if we need to, we are capable of being profoundly tender. We're capable of being, having profound courage. But yes, story has to drive all those things.
absolutely, absolutely. And as humans, we are psychologically wired to think in story, to be storytellers, to lean into stories. That's what I mean. That's what in a negative way propaganda is. It's someone spinning a story, we believe it, and before you know it, people voted Brexit. For
Yeah,
example, like, do you know what
yeah,
I mean? Like that's how it's always been. So we relate to stories. A lot of people are like, I'm not creative. I don't know. No. We all lean in and we all can relate to stories. And I think, and we can't, we really shouldn't take for granted how powerful stories and storytelling is, especially for those big things, especially
yeah,
to connect people, to bring people together, even more so.
yeah,
I wanted to talk a bit about, yeah, like, with like dramaturgy and climate dramaturgy. Let's lean into that a bit more.
yeah.
Dramaturgy as a concept as a whole often trains us to simplify a problem and to find solutions and clarity. But climate dramaturgy resists that.
Mm.
And it's about staying in the mess, so to
Yeah.
speak. Um, so yeah, I just want us to kind of like, how do you relate to that? How does that resonate with you?
That resonates with me in that if we were to make this, I can only, I suppose, talk about this piece of work specifically. It's
Yeah.
that helpful to
Yeah,
think
that's
about
helpful. Yeah, that's fine.
those. So just to use a template of like work Chris and I've made together in the past is that to acknowledge that we're all guilty of wanting to turn away, that
Yeah.
what that wanting to turn away is a really human
Mm,
and forgivable and really understandable act, and it is about wanting to preserve your sanity and your, just like you said earlier, like I just want to get through the day, or I just want to get
Yeah,
through
yeah.
Christmas, or like how can I hold whatever it is I need to hold. And that is like, yeah, of course. So coming at it, making sure that we don't come at it like the easy angle would be to come at it like, you all need to stop doing that. That would be like the easy fix dramaturgically, and to make a piece of work that did that. I suppose the messier fix in terms of thinking about climate dramaturgy is going, what are the fibers of this? Like Zoe has that. I'm sure you've probably talked to Zoe about the wonderful figure of eight.
Yes, yeah,
Infinity symbol that she talks about. It's got a
yeah.
name, isn't it? What's it called? The loops. It's called the loops. And she talks about how you might have a moment of clarity over here where you're like, oh my gosh, I need to do something. And then like maybe like you get a phone call from your boss, or like your kid is sick off school, or like you've got to care for somebody, and then you're like, I'll
Yeah.
turn on Netflix, whatever your behavior is. And then you come up over here, and then you end up back over here. And the question is like, we all have, I suppose, dramaturgically to come at it from the angle of like, look, we are all doing that.
Yeah.
Let's understand that we're all doing that, and that is a forgivable system, and no one is in the business of saying you shouldn't be. No one is going to shame you for that. So
Yeah.
shame, I think, is a really interesting
Yeah, yeah.
tool, because shame and fear combined create inaction.
Absolutely. It paralyzes people. Absolutely.
Absolutely parasite. So if you neutralize, I'm really interested in what happens if you go, yeah, we're all doing that.
Mm.
That's understandable. I'm doing it too. What happens if you make a space where you can neutralize that?
Yeah.
And probably that means the space has to be interactive in some way. Personally, I hate interactive work, so I always try and make interactive work that even I would be comfortable in, because I'm always like, I don't want to do it. Like, don't make me do it. Don't make me sit at the front. So like, I use myself as my own.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good idea.
Really high, I've got a really high cringe litmus person. And then we've got a sort of a set of rules, I suppose, that we've developed that we would revise in light of thinking about climate dramaturgy. But those rules are like, don't ask anyone in the room to do anything you're not going to do yourself. So if you're going to ask for story, then you have to offer story. Like you can't,
Yeah.
don't. And then if any information you're going to ask for, you have to tell them what you're going to do with it.
Mm.
Like, and you have to use it meaningfully, because there is nothing worse than being asked for stuff and you're like, the audience can feel when you're extracting from them, and they know if you're going to be they can feel if you're going to be inauthentic with them.
I agree. I agree. And it's like, you need to take people on that journey, because how do you expect people to lean in? You can't, I
Exactly.
mean, that's just the journey. That's change, right? You can't expect people to go on this journey if change is at you and not with you and by you and to get, together. And that
Yeah.
includes what you're saying as well. And we, coming out as humans, we're pretty clued up in that. We know when you're sitting there or when you're engaging with something, hang on, and it's just like, take us on that journey. And
Yes.
I think with climate dramaturgy sometimes feels a bit up here for me, and the way I can bring it down is simplifying it in those ways and those aspects. When I first connected, when I first kind of like started this role 6 months ago, and it was like about climate dramaturgy, I was just like, whoa, 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 that feels over there, and I think yeah, it was the word climate, and I'm really, really passionate about climate action and climate. I call it action sometimes because I like the word action,
Yeah.
or if it's justice, because I also like the word justice,
Yeah.
change, all of that. And for me, the way I include in dramaturgy, the way I can really relate to it, and I always say this to people: what's your entry points in anything? Because everyone's entry points will be different, and that's okay. And I've spoken a lot about this. My entry point was actually thinking about my environment and thinking about health, thinking about my child. The wider thing about melting ice caps and changing weather and things like that, yeah, fine, but that felt like an over there concept.
Yeah.
And this is how I'm approaching climate dramaturgy as well. But when I really thought about, can I go about my day in a way that I should? Can I step outside my home? Can I move about this world with ease or whatever? No, I can't.
Yeah. And it's finding those within a show which bring it close enough. I think it's like a combination of things you're looking for in a story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or story, which is like you got to earth it, ground it, bring it closer,
Yeah.
and also then stretch it. So I always think there's a way of like dramaturgically kind of going like, how close can you get, and then how much can you like pull away? And we came up with this image, and then I'm personally really interested in what the role of metaphor and poetry is in that, because there's some bits. I think just poetry is like a dying art, and I personally hate how poetry is used in theatre. Like I get really like, uh, um, it's like not a separate artifact. It's just part of talking. It's just
Mm.
another way of
Yeah,
talking. It's another use of
absolutely.
image. It's like a slightly different brain system, and I think you can't
Yeah.
sustain it for very long, but you can flick into it. Like you can ground something and then go like, we're going to go over here, stretchy bit where you're like, what if? That's
Yeah.
what I think metaphor is for. Is like, what if this? And then you can earth it back down again. We came up with this image of like somebody standing on their pathway with a wheelie suitcase, needing to get up to go to a flight somewhere at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and the lights are all off. And you
Mm.
start walking down the pathway, and you're aware as you're walking that you're running snails over, and you hear the crunch of like your suitcase. And then you have that moment where and then we wanted to sort of suspend it with the person being like, do I carry on down the path? Do I go
Mm.
back? And then,
Yeah, yeah,
and like, we just wanted to find a really recognizable moment where something in your everyday where
yeah,
we're like, no, I've done that, where you
yeah,
go, oh, dead snail, or I
yeah.
can't get where I'm going. You have a moment of like human agency where you're like, yeah, I'm choosing to go because I've got to get my plane. And then you're like,
Yeah.
hang on, you're getting a plane. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so we wanted to find those kinds of hinges where it's,
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the example I gave. And because I was talking to a friend, and she was just like, it's just too big, it's too much. And it's like, again, where's your point of entry?
yeah,
Find, like, or find or talk about it, because sometimes it's like I don't know what my point of entry is. But once you know your point of entry, it becomes less this and more this, and it's
yeah,
like, right, I can do something. Then it feels less impossible.
I know. And I
It's like,
think
oh,
that's
okay, I can
probably,
grasp that. I can understand that.
and that's true of probably everything, isn't it? Like it's
Yeah,
true of
absolutely.
like, yeah,
I feel like none of this stuff is rocket science, but I just feel
no,
like
I know
we
the
just
thing
got.
is, that's the crazy thing. So when thinking about a show, I just think it's a case of finding compelling and really moving and powerful and funny stories. You like using all of those tools that like
Yeah,
theatre has the advantage of doing all in one to go
yeah,
like, okay, how do we build this?
yeah.
How do we look at this as a form of like increasing our trying to think of it as like increasing our muscle that's like got slack.
So High Tide is a small theatre company. Like there's five of us, right? And we tour roughly 1 to 2 times a year, and it's about what you can do. So for a small organization, we're not building base, but we are on trains a lot. We are, we tour a lot, and for us, it's like, what can we do? So for it not to feel impossible to even begin to think, what does this look like for our organization? Is again leaning into that abundance, and this is what we can do, and this is what we're able to do, because we can't do it all. And I don't think
No,
that's what we're saying as humans, as organizations, as institutions. We're not saying to do it all, but if everybody does something, obviously that's
yeah,
better than doing nothing. And for you as an artist, whether you're, or if we're talking organizationally, what can you do?
absolutely, exactly. And even
Make
if
it
that,
smaller for yourself. Let's not. Why are we starting here?
yeah,
Let's start, because we can grow out, but
yeah,
rather start here and then be like, no, and then we stop. Start
yeah,
here, and
yeah,
then you can do that.
yeah.
Here, you know.
Even if it's just, and even if it's just that someone even couldn't do something, but they can change the way they think. They can change the way they think about something so that in conversation with someone else, that is change. Like it doesn't,
Absolutely.
someone's like, oh, I'm busy. And you're like, sure. But you're probably having conversations with people.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
you're probably in connection with other people
yeah,
somewhere. I hope for everyone they're in connection
yeah,
with someone
yeah,
somewhere. And that is doing something. Like there's the physical things we can do, and then there's the
yeah.
thinking. And
For me, lean into the collectiveness of this. One of the things I was is as again, because of society, because of life, we want things to be fixed and sorted out, and to find a solution. And I get that.
mm,
But climate action is collective, but it's also messy, and it's also leaning into that to make it feel human.
yeah,
And I think we shouldn't be afraid of the mess. We shouldn't be afraid of failing either. And I say failing because what is even that? But we shouldn't be afraid of, like, okay, I'm still trying to figure this out. I don't think I've got it right. Oh, but it's okay because it's a we more than a. Let's not put the onus on individualists, kind of thing. And I was speaking to this climate kind of writer and dramaturg called Andrew Burton, and
yeah,
we were talking a lot about factions actually, and division, and because especially now politically, it's so rife with divisions. We're so
yeah,
divided,
Yeah.
And again, that's capitalism. That's a lot
Yeah.
of the systems that we are having to move and live in is, and we're moving more and more away from collective connectivity and collectivity and into individualism, factions over there. There's so much that's been divisive, that's dividing us. It's just so thick with
Yeah.
it, right? Just all of this division.
Yeah.
For me, it's leaning into the mess of it all, and let's be messy and figure out together. So let's leave shame aside. Let's leave having to do the right thing. Let's lean into the, what are we doing? I don't know. Let's figure it out together.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And I
really
think there's a
that.
story there, thinking about again about story, there's a story there that's been spun to us, which is such a lie. It's such a lie. And it's like just going, that story you've been told about being neat
Yeah,
and achieving and being, oh, this, or whatever someone's life is made up of, like, is not true. What is true of everyone is just trying. Everyone is trying within what they are able to do in that exact moment. Like that's what we are. We are all a massive mess. Like,
absolutely.
and that's not the reason to not do something. Like there's never going to be a stage where you're like, oh, my life's really perfect now.
Exactly. That is never going to happen.
Never going to happen.